The wedding was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life. My son, my only child, was getting married. It was the culmination of all the years of love, of guiding him through life, of watching him grow into the man he was meant to be. I had dreamed of this day, a beautiful ceremony, a lovely bride, and my family gathered together to celebrate. I should have known, though, that something was off. Weddings, they say, have a way of bringing out the best in people. But as I sat in the grand hall of the venue, surrounded by flowers and music, I felt something else, a quiet unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my nerves. Everything had to be perfect. I had spent weeks preparing, picking out the right outfit, helping with the final touches for the reception. But despite all the planning, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was as if I could sense the tension in the air, even before the first vows were exchanged. My son, Ethan, stood at the altar, nervously adjusting his tie. He had always been a bit of a perfectionist, and today was no different. I could see his hands trembling slightly as he tried to mask his nerves. I smiled at him from where I sat in the front row, but inside, my heart ached. This was supposed to be his big day, the start of a new chapter in his life, and all I could feel was the strange heaviness that lingered between us. Vanessa, my soon-to-be daughter-in-law, stood next to him. She was beautiful, no doubt, tall, poised, and stunning in her white gown. I couldn't deny that she was everything Ethan had wanted, or so I thought. But as I looked at her, something felt off. It wasn't just the way she was standing, arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if she were guarding herself against something. It wasn't just the cold smile she gave me when our eyes met. It was the way she had treated me in the weeks leading up to this day. I tried to shake off the feeling. Maybe I was just nervous, maybe I was overthinking things. This day wasn't about me. It was about Ethan and Vanessa, and that's all that should have mattered. The ceremony went as planned for the most part. The vows were exchanged, promises were made, and the couple kissed under the arched floral arrangement. I couldn't help but smile, even though I felt a pang in my heart. There was my son, standing at the altar, promising to love and cherish Vanessa for the rest of his life. I had raised him to be kind, to be compassionate, and to choose someone who would support him. And yet, a part of me couldn't help but wonder if he was truly ready for this. As we all gathered in the reception hall later that evening, the tension seemed to rise. I smiled and chatted with relatives, trying to ignore the unease that had settled in my chest. The room was full of laughter, dancing, and the clinking of glasses. But amidst all of it, I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in my own family's celebration. Vanessa was the center of attention. Everyone doted on her, congratulated her, and praised her beauty. She smiled politely, but there was an edge to her smile that I couldn't quite place. Her eyes seemed to be scanning the room, not with the joy that most brides have, but with something else. Something colder. I tried to push it out of my mind and focus on Ethan. He was dancing with some of the guests, his usual shy demeanor replaced with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he had made the right choice. At least, I hoped he had. I excused myself for a moment and stepped outside to get some air. I needed a break from the noise, from the bright lights, and from the tension I felt between myself and Vanessa. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath. And then I saw her. Vanessa, standing by the door watching me. Her expression was unreadable, but I felt a chill run down my spine. She was alone, and I could feel the weight of her gaze. I smiled awkwardly and made my way toward her. "Vanessa," I said, my voice tight with nerves, "it's a beautiful night, isn't it?" She didn't smile back. Instead, she stared at me for a long moment, her eyes cold. "Yes, it is," she replied softly. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself." I blinked in surprise. The tone of her voice, the way she looked at me, it wasn't what I expected. "Of course, I'm happy. It's your special day," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. "I just wanted to step outside for a bit. It's a lot to take in, you know." She nodded, but there was something about the way she stood that made me feel uneasy. "Yes, I know. It's all so overwhelming, but it's worth it, right?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure what she meant by that. "Of course. I'm just glad that Ethan has found someone who makes him happy." There was a long pause. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment I thought she was going to say something else. But instead, she took a step closer to me, her gaze never leaving mine. "You know," she said slowly, "Ethan talks about you a lot. He says you've always been there for him, that you've always been the one to guide him. But he also says you've never really let him grow up. You've always been too protective, too controlling. My heart skipped a beat. The words hit harder than I expected. Controlling, protective. I opened my mouth to respond, but Vanessa raised a hand, cutting me off. Don't worry, I'm sure you mean well, but this is my marriage now. I'm the one he'll be listening to from now on, not you. The words stung more than I cared to admit. I stood there, frozen, as the weight of her words sank in. I had raised Ethan, loved him, cared for him, and now, on the most important day of his life, his wife was telling me that I had no place in his future. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had to hold it together. I couldn't let her see how much her words affected me. I'm just trying to be supportive, I said quietly, forcing a smile. I want what's best for both of you. Vanessa smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was cold, almost mocking. Well, then I'm sure you'll understand when I say that I'm going to be the one who decides what's best for our marriage, not you and not anyone else. The rest of the evening went by in a blur. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been blindsided. I had always known that Vanessa and I didn't exactly get along, but I never imagined she would be so blatant about her disdain for me. She had made it clear that I was no longer welcome in Ethan's life the way I once had been. She had won. I watched Ethan from across the room, dancing and laughing, completely oblivious to the tension that had just transpired between his wife and me. For a moment, I felt a pang of sorrow. I had hoped for years that he would find someone who would love him the way I did, but I never imagined that the woman he chose would make me feel so small, so irrelevant. The next day, I woke up with a headache, both from the wine I had drank the night before and the emotional toll the wedding had taken on me. I lay in bed for a while, just staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. I had spent so many years pouring my love and energy into my family, into Ethan, that I never imagined this is how it would end. It felt like I had been cast aside, forgotten. But then, as I lay there, something clicked inside me. I was not invisible. I was not disposable. I had spent my life being a mother, a wife, a daughter-in-law. I had always defined myself through others. But no more. If Vanessa wanted to try and take Ethan away from me, she was welcome to, but I wasn't going to let her destroy me in the process. I was strong. I had survived worse, and I would not let her tear me down. I stood up, a sense of determination filling me. I wasn't going to let this woman have power over me. She could mock me, she could belittle me, but she would never break me. I took a deep breath and made my decision. It was time to take back control, to remind everyone, including myself, that I mattered, that I was still me. And no one, not even my daughter-in-law, could take that away. I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let her win. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready. I was going to fight for myself, for my place in my son's life, and for the peace I had been denied for so long. The battle wasn't over yet, but I had just begun to take back control of my story, and no one would stand in my way. The day after the wedding felt like a blur. I had stayed up late, my mind racing, replaying the moment over and over in my head. I couldn't shake the image of Vanessa's cold smile as she mocked me in front of all those people, my own son's wedding day no less. I kept asking myself, how did we get here? How had I gone from being the proud mother of the groom to a target of ridicule? I spent the whole night tossing and turning, my mind filled with questions and anger. I felt humiliated, but worse than that, I felt betrayed. Ethan, my son, the boy I had raised with so much love, had just stood by and allowed it. It wasn't just Vanessa's words that hurt, it was the fact that Ethan had done nothing to defend me. I knew the day after the wedding was supposed to be about happiness and celebration, but instead, I was filled with this aching emptiness. I had never felt so alone, not even in the darkest moments of my life. I stood in the bathroom, looking at myself in the mirror, trying to understand what had happened. My reflection seemed distant, unfamiliar. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. The humiliation from the night before hung over me like a thick cloud. I had to admit it, Vanessa had gotten to me, and maybe that was the worst part of all. She had made me doubt myself, made me feel like I was irrelevant, like I had no place in my son's life anymore. I wasn't just her target. I was invisible, or worse, disposable. I wiped away the tear that had fallen down my cheek, angry at myself for letting her have this effect on me. I couldn't let this happen again. I couldn't let her make me feel small. Not anymore. I sat down in the small kitchen of my apartment, sipping my coffee in silence, trying to gather my thoughts. The morning after the wedding, I had hoped for some clarity, but instead, the world felt even more confusing. I kept hearing Vanessa's voice in my head, her mocking tone echoing as she spoke in front of everyone. I wanted to scream, to let it all out, but I couldn't. Not here, not like this. It was time to take a step back. I needed to take control. I couldn't go on like this. My entire life had been about giving to others, my son, my husband, my family. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. I had allowed myself to be defined by their needs, their expectations. And now, when I needed them the most, they were nowhere to be found. I had to reclaim my own life. I wasn't sure where to start, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I grabbed my phone and dialed Jessica's number. She had been my best friend for years, and even though I hadn't talked to her as much as I should have, I knew she would understand. "Hey, it's me," I said when she answered. "I need to talk." "I figured as much," she replied, her voice gentle. "How are you holding up after the wedding?" I paused for a moment, the emotions bubbling up again. "Not great. Vanessa. She embarrassed me in front of everyone, Jess, and Ethan, he just stood there. He didn't say anything." Her voice grew serious. "I know you're hurt, but you need to think about what comes next. You can't let her get away with this." "I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. "I've spent my whole life making sure everyone else is happy, and now I'm left standing here, wondering where I fit in." "You fit in your life, that's where you fit in," Jessica said firmly. "You've been putting everyone else's needs first, but when was the last time you did something just for you? You're more than just a mother or a wife or a daughter-in-law. You're you, and you deserve to be treated with respect." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about her words. "But it's not that simple, Jess. I don't know if I can change things. I don't know if I can get through to Ethan or Vanessa." "You can," she said, her voice full of conviction. "But you need to start with yourself. You've already been through so much. You've raised Ethan on your own, you've dealt with the fallout of your marriage, and you've been a rock for your family. You've got this. But you need to stop letting them walk all over you. You've earned your place." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. I had been running on empty for so long, living my life for others, always making sure everyone else was okay. But what about me? I deserved to be happy, to have my voice heard. I deserved to be respected, especially by the people closest to me. "I'm tired of being afraid," I said quietly, my voice shaking slightly. "Tired of feeling like I don't matter. I need to do something about this." "That's the spirit," Jessica replied. "Start by setting boundaries. It's not easy, but you're stronger than you think, and I'll be here to support you every step of the way." Over the next few days, I took some time to think about what Jessica had said. I thought about my life, about how I had allowed myself to be overlooked, disrespected, and diminished by people who should have loved and supported me. I thought about Vanessa's words at the wedding, the way she had tried to make me feel like I was nothing. But what really hurt wasn't just the insult, it was the fact that I had allowed it to happen without standing up for myself. I had let her walk all over me. That had to change. I had to change. I started by making a list. It was simple, but it helped clear my mind. I wrote down the things I wanted for myself. For the first time in a long time, I focused on my needs. I wanted to regain my confidence. I wanted to find my voice again. I wanted to feel respected, not just by others, but by myself. I took that list and pinned it to my wall. It was a reminder that I was important, that I had value. It was a daily affirmation that I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The following weekend, I decided to meet with Vanessa. It wasn't going to be easy, and part of me was terrified. But I knew it was time to confront her, not out of anger, but out of a desire to stand up for myself. I couldn't keep letting her mock me and expect me to stay silent. When I showed up at her house, she answered the door with that same cold smile. For a moment, I hesitated, but then I reminded myself of my purpose. I was here for myself, not for her. "Vanessa," I said, my voice calm but firm, "we need to talk." She stepped aside and let me in, her expression guarded. "About what?" "About how you humiliated me at the wedding," I said. "In front of everyone. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't hurt by what you said. You've made it clear that you don't like me, but I'm still Ethan's mother. And I won't stand by while you tear me down." She crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing slightly. Oh, please, it was just a joke. You're being overly sensitive. I don't care about your jokes, I replied, standing my ground. What you said wasn't funny, and it wasn't a joke. It was meant to make me feel small, and I won't allow you to do that anymore. Vanessa opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand, cutting her off. No, I've let you walk all over me for too long. I've let you dictate the terms of my relationship with my son, and I've let you treat me like I don't matter. But that ends now. I am not going to apologize for who I am, and I am not going to accept being disrespected anymore. You're welcome to be a part of Ethan's life, but you need to understand that I am too. There was a long silence between us. I could feel the tension in the room, but I didn't back down. I wasn't going to. This was my moment. This was my time to finally take control. I don't need your approval, I added, my voice steady, but I do expect respect. Vanessa didn't say anything at first, her face unreadable, but then she nodded slowly. Fine, she said, her tone cooler than before, but don't expect me to forget what happened. I'm not here to be friends, but I'll respect your boundaries. It wasn't the apology I had hoped for, but it was a start. More than that, it was a victory for me. For once, I had stood up for myself. I had demanded respect, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As I walked out of Vanessa's house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The hard conversation had been worth it. I hadn't backed down. I had shown her, and most importantly, I had shown myself that I would no longer let others control how I felt. Later that night, as I sat with Jake, he looked at me with a curious expression. Mom, how did it go with Vanessa? I smiled softly, feeling a surge of pride. It went well. I told her how I felt, and I'm not going to let anyone disrespect me anymore. Jake smiled back, his eyes shining with admiration. You're so strong, Mom. For the first time in a long time, I felt that strength, too. The strength to stand up for myself. To stop being the silent, submissive woman I had been for so long. I was reclaiming my life, and with each step, I knew that I was becoming the woman I was always meant to be. And I was ready for whatever came next. The days after my conversation with Vanessa passed in a blur. It felt as though the world around me had come to a standstill. My mind kept replaying the words I had said to her, the way I had stood up for myself. It wasn't easy. It wasn't comfortable. But something inside me had clicked. Something deep down had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. But I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know how to deal with the aftermath. I had confronted Vanessa, but my relationship with my son, Ethan, was still in a delicate place. The tension between us was palpable. I could feel it in the way he spoke to me, in the way he avoided my gaze when we were in the same room. I wasn't sure if I could fix things, but I knew I had to try. I had to find a way to restore the relationship that had been fractured by everything that had happened. That evening, after a long day of work, I found myself sitting in my kitchen with a cup of tea, staring out the window. The city lights flickered in the distance, and I let the silence wash over me. The weight of everything that had happened in the past few months, the divorce, the betrayal, the public humiliation, it all seemed so overwhelming sometimes. But I wasn't the same woman who had walked into that courtroom months ago. I had changed. I had found my voice, and I was learning how to use it. It wasn't going to be easy, I knew that. But I couldn't let fear or uncertainty stop me. If I wanted to heal, if I wanted to rebuild, I had to take the next step. The next day, I decided to call Ethan. I had been putting it off, not sure what to say or how to start the conversation. But I couldn't avoid him forever. I needed to speak to him, to clear the air between us. When he picked up the phone, there was an awkward pause before either of us spoke. It felt like we were both waiting for the other to break the silence. Finally, I spoke. Ethan, I said softly, we need to talk about what happened at the wedding. He sighed on the other end of the line. Mom, I don't want to argue with you about Vanessa. She's my wife now, and I don't want any more drama. I could feel the frustration in his words, the tension that had been building up between us. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not trying to start a fight, Ethan. I just want to understand why you didn't stand up for me, why you let her disrespect me like that. There was a long pause before he spoke again. I didn't know what to do, Mom. I didn't want to make things worse. I don't want you two to hate each other. His words cut deeper than I expected. It wasn't that he didn't care about me. It was that he was stuck in the middle, torn between me and Vanessa, and in his eyes, it seemed like I was the problem. I wasn't sure how to fix that. I didn't want to be the problem. I don't hate her, Ethan, I said, my voice breaking. I just want to be treated with respect. I'm your mother. I've spent my whole life taking care of you, and now I need you to understand that I deserve respect too, not just from her, but from you. I heard him shift on the other end of the line. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. I've been an idiot. I don't know how to balance everything. I don't want to lose you, but I don't want to lose her either. My heart ached for him. He was stuck between two worlds, and I couldn't make the decision for him, but I could help him understand. I could make him see that he didn't have to choose. I'm not asking you to choose, Ethan. I'm asking you to see that I'm your mother, and I need you to stand by me, just like I've stood by you your whole life. There was a silence, a heavy pause that felt like it lasted forever. Then he spoke again. His voice was softer now, almost apologetic. I don't know what to say, Mom, he said. I didn't realize how much this was affecting you. I promise I'll try to be better. I smiled through the tears that threatened to spill. That's all I need, Ethan, just a little understanding. We'll figure it out, I promise. The next few weeks were filled with small steps forward. Ethan and I began to talk more openly, and while things weren't perfect, they were better. Vanessa, on the other hand, remained distant. She didn't acknowledge our conversation, and every time we interacted, it felt like she was waiting for me to make a mistake. But I wasn't going to let her control me. I was done being silent, done being the woman who let others walk all over her. At work, I continued to excel. My new position brought challenges, but with them came the opportunity to prove myself. I wasn't just doing this for me, I was doing it for Jake, too. I had to show him that he could overcome anything, just like I had. I was building a life that was independent, strong, and full of possibilities. But there were still moments of doubt. Every time I saw Vanessa with Ethan, my heart clenched. She had taken so much from me, and I knew she would continue to try, but I refused to let her win. I wasn't going to back down. I was going to be the woman who fought for what she deserved. One afternoon, as I sat in my office, an email popped up on my screen. It was from Sarah, my boss. She was offering me a new project, one that would involve working with several high-profile clients. The pay was better, the responsibilities were greater, and it was exactly what I had been waiting for. This was the next step in my career, and I couldn't let it slip away. But I hesitated. I didn't want to get too wrapped up in work. I wanted to focus on myself, on my personal life. But then I realized something. This was exactly what I needed. This project would give me the chance to prove to myself that I was more than just a mother, more than just a wife. I was a woman with her own dreams, and I wasn't going to stop until I achieved them. I replied to Sarah, accepting the project. I could feel the excitement building inside me as I thought about the possibilities. This was my time. I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. That evening, I sat down with Jake, feeling a sense of pride. He had been my rock, and I had watched him grow into a young man who cared deeply for those around him. We had dinner together, just the two of us, and talked about everything and nothing at all. Mom, I can see how hard you're working, Jake said, looking at me with admiration. I'm proud of you. You've really come a long way. I smiled at him, my heart swelling with love. Thank you, baby. You've been my strength through all of this. I couldn't have made it without you. We sat there for a while, just talking, and I realized something. I had always thought I needed to be everything to everyone. I had always put others' needs before my own. But now I understood. It wasn't about being perfect. It wasn't about making everyone happy. It was about being true to myself. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. The next day, I made my way to the office, ready to tackle the new project. The challenge ahead didn't intimidate me. Instead, it excited me. I had worked hard to get to this point, and now I was going to prove just how capable I was. As I walked into the building, I realized that I wasn't just walking into a new project. I was walking into a new chapter of my life. One where I was no longer afraid to take risks, to stand up for myself, and to be the woman I was meant to be. I smiled to myself, knowing that whatever came next, I was ready, because I had already come so far. And this time, no one could take that away from me. The days after my conversation with Ethan were a mixture of emotions. I was relieved, yet anxious. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making progress. But at the same time, I knew things wouldn't be easy. Vanessa still had a hold on my son's life, and I could feel the distance growing between us every time we were in the same room. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending that everything was fine. I had spent so many years tiptoeing around Vanessa, trying to keep the peace. But now, something inside me had snapped. The woman I had been, the one who always took a backseat to keep others happy, was gone. I couldn't let her continue to treat me this way. I couldn't let her control my relationship with Ethan. I was his mother, and I had a right to be heard. That evening, after a long day at work, I found myself standing in front of the mirror in my bedroom. My reflection seemed like a stranger. The woman I saw was different from the one who had first met Vanessa. She was no longer afraid to speak up. She wasn't going to let herself be disrespected anymore. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and picked up my phone. It was time to call Vanessa. When she answered the phone, there was a brief silence on the other end. I wasn't sure if she was expecting my call, but I could tell she wasn't happy to hear from me. "Vanessa," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I need to talk to you about what happened at the wedding." There was a long pause before she spoke. "What about it?" I could hear the edge in her voice, but I wasn't backing down. "I need you to understand something. What you said about me in front of everyone was unacceptable. It was hurtful, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen." "Are you really going to make a big deal out of this?" she replied, her voice laced with sarcasm. "It was just a joke. You need to lighten up." "No, it wasn't just a joke," I said firmly. "It was meant to embarrass me, and I won't stand by and let you treat me like that. Not anymore." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I spoke. I had spent years biting my tongue, trying to keep the peace, but enough was enough. I wasn't going to let her belittle me anymore. I had worked too hard, fought too much, to be treated like this. "Mom, don't make this into something it's not," Vanessa said, her tone dripping with annoyance. "It's just a wedding. You're making it worse than it is." "No, you're the one making it worse," I snapped back. "I've spent years being polite, being the good mother-in-law, but you've crossed a line. I am Ethan's mother, and I deserve to be treated with respect. If you can't understand that, then maybe we need to reconsider our relationship." I could hear her sigh on the other end of the line. "Oh, come on, you're acting like this is the end of the world." "Maybe it's not the end of the world, but it's the end of me letting you treat me like this," I replied. "I'm not going to sit back and let you walk all over me anymore. You can't control everything, Vanessa. Not me, not Ethan. I won't let you." There was a long silence before she spoke again. "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "If that's how you feel, then maybe we need some space. You can't keep acting like this. You need to figure out what's really important." I was taken aback by her response, but I knew I couldn't back down now. "I'm doing what's best for me, Vanessa. I've spent too long trying to make everyone happy, trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. But I'm done with that. I'm not going to let anyone make me feel small anymore. Not even you." I ended the call before she could say anything else. The silence in the room felt deafening, but I didn't regret what I had said. I had stood up for myself for the first time in years, and that felt good. The next few days were strange. Ethan called me once or twice, but we didn't talk much. It was clear that things were still awkward between us, and I could feel the distance growing. I hated it. I hated that it had come to this, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't keep letting him think it was okay for me to be disrespected. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about me and Vanessa. This was about Ethan. This was about our relationship, about how I had allowed things to deteriorate between us. I had spent so many years trying to be a perfect mother, but in doing so, I had neglected my own needs, my own voice. I had let Ethan think that I would always be there to pick up the pieces, to do whatever he needed, without ever asking for anything in return. But I was done with that. A few days later, I received a text message from Ethan. It was simple, but it made my heart race. "Mom, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. I wasn't sure what he was going to say, but I knew this was the moment. This was the chance to fix things, to rebuild our relationship. I couldn't keep avoiding the difficult conversations. I replied quickly, "Of course, when?" "Tonight, I'll come by your place after dinner." I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves. I knew this conversation was going to be hard, but it was necessary. I had already made the decision to stand up for myself, to set boundaries. And now, it was time to do the same with Ethan. That evening, as I waited for Ethan to arrive, my mind raced with thoughts of what might happen. I knew I had to be honest with him, but I also knew that this wasn't just about me. This was about us, our family, and the respect we needed to rebuild. When the doorbell rang, my heart skipped a beat. I opened the door to find Ethan standing there, his hands in his pockets, looking more nervous than I had ever seen him. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "Hey, Ethan," I replied, my voice steady but my emotions threatening to spill over. "Come on in." He stepped inside, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence between us was thick, filled with unspoken words, but I knew this moment was important. It was time to stop dancing around the issues. It was time to talk. "I'm glad you called," I said, trying to break the tension. "I think we need to talk about everything, about Vanessa, about what happened at the wedding, about how we've been treating each other." Ethan nodded, looking down at the floor. "I know. I've been thinking about it a lot. I didn't realize how much I hurt you, Mom. I was so focused on trying to keep the peace between you and Vanessa, I didn't see how much I was letting you down." I could feel the emotion in his words, and it made my heart ache. He was still my son, and hearing him admit that he had hurt me was painful, but I also knew it was necessary. "I don't want to make you choose, Ethan," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I need you to understand that I can't keep being treated this way. I am your mother, and I deserve respect. I don't want to fight with Vanessa, but I won't let her treat me like I don't matter. And I won't let you stand by and do nothing." Ethan looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom. You're right. I should have defended you. I should have stood up for you. I let you down, and I regret that." The words I had been waiting to hear finally came out of his mouth. The weight I had been carrying for so long seemed to lighten just a little. "I don't want to lose you, Mom," he continued. "You've always been there for me, and I want to be there for you. I promise I'll do better. I'll make sure I stand up for you. You deserve that." I felt the tears welling up in my eyes, but I forced them back. This was progress. This was the beginning of healing. "I'm not asking you to choose, Ethan," I said softly, "but I need you to see me. I need you to see how much I've done for you, for this family. And I need you to stand by me when I need you the most." He stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me in a tight hug. I could feel the sincerity in his embrace. "I'm sorry, Mom. I won't let you down again." As we pulled away, I looked at him with a new sense of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but this was a start. We had made the first step toward healing. And I knew, in that moment, that everything was going to be okay. As Ethan left later that night, I sat on the couch, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had made the decision to stand up for myself. I had confronted Vanessa. I had told Ethan what I needed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally being heard. The journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more hard conversations, and more battles to fight. But for the first time, I knew I was ready. Because I had already fought the hardest fight of all, I had fought for myself. And no one, not Vanessa, not even Ethan, could take that away from me. It had been a few days since my conversation with Ethan. A part of me was relieved, but there was another part that remained unsettled. Despite his words, despite the apology, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. Things hadn't magically gone back to normal between us. I had done my part in standing up for myself, but the aftermath, the tension, the hurt lingered. I was sitting in my small kitchen, sipping my morning coffee, when I heard the familiar sound of my phone ringing. It was from an unknown number, and I immediately felt a sense of dread. I had been expecting this call. I hadn't heard from Vanessa since the wedding, and deep down, I knew she wouldn't let things go without a response. I hesitated before answering, but I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. "Hello," I said, trying to sound calm, though my heart was racing. "Hi, is this Sarah?" The voice on the other end was smooth, controlled, and instantly recognizable. It was Vanessa. I sighed, sitting back in my chair, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yes, it is. What's this about?" "I think it's time we talked," Vanessa said, her tone cool and collected. "You and we need to clear the air." I wasn't sure how I felt about that. I hadn't wanted to confront Vanessa directly after our last encounter, but it seemed inevitable now. She wasn't going to let things rest. "I'm listening," I said, not sure whether I should be cautious or confident. "I know you don't like me, Sarah," Vanessa began, her words almost too calm. "And I know you think I'm the one who's been causing all this tension between us. But the truth is, I've tried. I've tried to make this work with you, but you've made it impossible." I closed my eyes, trying to control the anger rising in my chest. "I never made it impossible for you, Vanessa. All I ever asked was for you to treat me with respect, like I'm a part of this family." She laughed lightly, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was condescending. "Oh, I treat you with respect, all right. But it's not my fault that you don't know how to let go. You're so used to being in control, so used to running the show, that you can't stand the idea of me taking my place in Ethan's life." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She wasn't wrong about some things. I had been in control for so long. I had spent my whole life making sure everyone else was happy. But hearing her say it, hearing her twist it into something negative, made me feel like I had been doing everything wrong. "I never tried to take control of Ethan's life," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I've always just wanted what's best for him." "Well, he's not a little boy anymore," Vanessa replied, the sharpness in her tone cutting through the air. "You have to accept that. He's married now, and that means things change." "I know that," I said, feeling the sting of her words. "But that doesn't mean I should be pushed aside. I'm his mother, Vanessa, and I deserve more than to be treated like I'm irrelevant." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. I could hear her breathing softly, probably trying to figure out what to say next. "You don't get it, do you?" she finally said, her voice colder than before. "You think you're entitled to a place in his life, but I'm his wife now. I'm the one who's going to be there for him. And if you think you can just waltz in and demand respect after everything that's happened, you're wrong." I felt my hands tighten around the phone. Her words were like daggers. I had been expecting this, the coldness, the accusations, the outright disregard for my feelings, but hearing it all laid out so bluntly made it even harder to swallow. "I'm not asking for a place in his life, Vanessa," I said through gritted teeth. "I'm not asking to control him or his marriage. I'm asking to be treated with the respect I deserve as his mother. Nothing more, nothing less." She laughed again, but this time it was full of mockery. "Respect? You really think that's what this is about? You think I'm going to just sit back and let you have your way with everything? You're out of touch, Sarah. You've spent too many years thinking you could control everything. But not anymore." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't the conversation I had hoped for. It wasn't the kind of resolution I had imagined. But it was clear to me now. Vanessa wasn't interested in making peace. She wasn't interested in listening. She just wanted to win. "Fine," I said, keeping my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "If that's how you feel, then we'll just have to agree to disagree. But I won't let you disrespect me anymore, Vanessa. I won't let anyone treat me like I don't matter." Her silence on the other end of the line was deafening, but then she spoke again, her voice low. "This isn't over, Sarah. I'll make sure of that." I could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air as I ended the call. My hands shook as I placed the phone down on the table. The tension in the room was suffocating. I had done what I needed to do. I had confronted her, but I knew things weren't going to magically get better. I had taken a stand for myself, but Vanessa wasn't someone who would just let things go. I felt the urge to cry, but I refused to let myself break down. Not now, not when I had already come so far. I had to stay strong. Over the next few days, things grew increasingly tense. Ethan and I spoke less and less, and I could feel the distance growing between us. I had hoped that our conversation would lead to some kind of understanding, but it hadn't. In fact, it seemed like things had only gotten worse. Vanessa's words had planted seeds of doubt in Ethan's mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was drifting away from me. At work, I threw myself into my projects, trying to distract myself from the growing unease in my personal life. But it was hard. It was hard to focus when I knew that the most important relationship in my life was slipping through my fingers. One evening, as I sat in my office, staring at my computer screen, I received a text message from Ethan. The message was simple, but it felt like a lifeline. "Can we talk? I don't want this to come between us." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the conversation I had been waiting for, the moment where we would finally address everything that had happened. I quickly typed a reply. Of course, when? I'm on my way. When Ethan arrived at my apartment that evening, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He was tired, tired of the tension, tired of the fighting. He stood at the door for a moment, his hand resting on the handle, as if unsure whether to enter. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on both of us. "Mom," he said quietly when he finally stepped inside. "We need to talk, really talk." I nodded, motioning for him to sit down. "I'm listening, Ethan." He took a deep breath and sat down across from me, his hands clasped tightly together. "I know I've been distant. I've been caught in the middle of all this and I haven't known how to handle it. But I'm sorry, Mom. I should have stood by you. I should have listened to you." My heart ached as I listened to his words. This was the conversation I had wanted, the one where he acknowledged how much I had sacrificed, how much I had done for him. But it wasn't just about the apology. It was about the understanding that had been lacking between us for so long. "I understand that things have been hard, Ethan," I said, my voice trembling. "But I can't keep pretending like everything's okay when it's not. I need you to see me. I need you to stand by me. I've always stood by you, even when it was hard. But I can't do this alone anymore." He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. "I've been selfish. I've been so focused on trying to keep the peace that I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter." I nodded, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. "I've spent so many years making sure everyone else was happy, Ethan. But now, I need to make sure I'm happy too." He reached across the table and took my hand in his grip warm and steady. "We're going to fix this, Mom. I promise. I don't want to lose you." I squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something new. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was willing to fight for us, for our relationship. And this time I wasn't backing down, not for anyone, not for Vanessa, not for anything. We were going to rebuild. Together. I woke up that morning with a heavy heart, the lingering effects of the conversation with Vanessa still fresh in my mind. After everything that had happened, the wedding, the humiliation, the words that had been said, I had hoped that the worst was over. But it felt like the storm had only just begun. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling me from my thoughts. I glanced at it and saw a message from Ethan. I hadn't heard from him since our last talk, and though part of me was relieved that he wasn't trying to avoid me, another part of me was nervous. What did he want now? "Mom, can we talk? Please, I need to explain things." The message was short and to the point. I couldn't ignore it. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when my son would realize the impact of his actions, the way Vanessa's treatment of me had affected us all. And now, it seemed like he was ready to talk, to make things right. I let out a long breath, picked up my phone, and replied. "Of course, when? I'm on my way." My heart skipped a beat. He was coming over. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but I knew this conversation wouldn't be easy. The road to understanding, to healing, was always a difficult one. But I was ready. Ready to finally speak my truth, ready to make Ethan see me, not just as his mother, but as a woman with her own voice, her own needs. When Ethan arrived, he looked different. He was no longer the young man I had raised, so sure of himself, so confident. His face was drawn, his eyes tired. He had been through a lot, and I knew that it wasn't just about me. He had been caught in the middle of a situation he never asked for. But that didn't change the fact that he had hurt me, had allowed Vanessa to mock me without saying a word. I motioned for him to sit down, my hands shaking slightly as I prepared myself for what was to come. I had to stay strong. I had to make him understand. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady but not without emotion, "we need to talk about everything. About what happened at the wedding. About the way you've been treating me." He sat down across from me, his posture stiff, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I know, Mom. I've been thinking about it, and I know I've hurt you. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they held weight. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, but I wasn't sure if that would be enough. I needed more than just an apology. I needed him to understand why it hurt. I needed him to realize that I wasn't just his mother, but a person in my own right. "I appreciate your apology, Ethan," I said softly. "But it's not just about saying sorry. It's about understanding the impact of what happened. Vanessa's words, her treatment of me, it wasn't just a joke. It was a message, and it hurt. It hurt because it felt like she was trying to erase me from your life. It hurt because you let her. He winced at the words, his face contorting with guilt. I could see that the weight of my words was sinking in, but I needed to go deeper. I needed him to understand everything, the years of sacrifice, the love I had given him, and the way I had always tried to be there, even when it wasn't easy. I've spent my whole life making sure you were okay, Ethan, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. I raised you on my own, did everything I could to make sure you had everything you needed. And then, when you got older, I watched as you built a life with Vanessa. But it feels like I'm being erased from that life, like I don't matter anymore. Do you know how that feels? Ethan looked away, his eyes dark with shame. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to fix what had been broken. I never wanted to hurt you, Mom, he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away. I was just trying to keep the peace, trying to keep things from falling apart. But I see now that I've made everything worse. I felt a pang of sadness in my chest. I knew he had been trying to do the right thing in his own way, but his actions had hurt me, and now we were both left to pick up the pieces. I wasn't sure what would happen next. But I knew this. I wasn't going to let him continue to ignore how I felt. I don't need you to choose between me and Vanessa, I said, trying to steady my emotions. But I do need you to understand that I am your mother. I deserve to be respected. I deserve to be a part of your life. And I'm not going to sit in the background anymore, waiting for permission to be seen. He stared at me, his face softening. I'm sorry, Mom. I should have known better. I should have protected you. That was it. That was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment where Ethan finally understood. He wasn't just apologizing, he was acknowledging that I had a right to be part of his life. That I had a right to exist in his world without fear of being pushed aside. I know you've been trying to keep the peace, Ethan, I said, my voice calm now. But you can't keep everyone happy all the time. Sometimes you have to stand up for the people who matter. You have to stand up for what's right. He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. You're right, Mom. I've been so focused on making everyone else happy that I've forgotten what really matters. You matter. You've always mattered. The weight of the conversation began to lift, but I knew we still had a long way to go. Our relationship wasn't going to be fixed overnight. But for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. We were both willing to fight for what we had, for the bond we had shared, even when things got tough. The following weeks were filled with small changes. Ethan and I started spending more time together, having long talks about everything, our past, our present, and what the future might look like. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the old patterns resurfaced. But each time, we worked through them, slowly but surely. Vanessa, on the other hand, remained distant. She didn't acknowledge our conversation, and I could tell she wasn't interested in making things right. But I wasn't concerned with her anymore. I was focused on my relationship with Ethan. That was what mattered most. I also started focusing more on myself. I'd spent so much time trying to fix everyone else, trying to please everyone around me, that I had neglected my own needs. I had stopped painting, stopped doing the things that made me happy. But now, I was taking those small steps back toward the woman I had once been, the woman who didn't apologize for wanting more. I went to the art store again, bought a new set of paints, and set up my easel in the corner of my living room. The first brushstrokes felt like freedom. I wasn't painting for anyone else. I wasn't painting to impress anyone. I was painting for myself, and that was enough. One evening, I found myself sitting on the couch, thinking about everything that had happened. My phone buzzed on the table, breaking my train of thought. I picked it up and saw a message from Jessica, my best friend. Hey, how are you? We need to celebrate soon. You've come so far. I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. Jessica had been there for me from the very beginning, through the divorce, through the humiliation, through all of it. She had always been my rock, reminding me that I was strong, even when I didn't feel like it. I'm good, really good. I think I'm finally finding my way again, I replied. That's amazing. Let's make plans to get together soon. You deserve to celebrate. A week later, Jessica and I met at a small cafe in the city. We sat at a corner table, sipping coffee and talking about everything and nothing. I felt lighter, freer than I had in a long time. "So," she said, leaning forward with a smile, "how are things with Ethan? Is everything okay?" I nodded, smiling back. "We're getting there. It's not perfect, but we're making progress. He's been trying. I think he finally gets it." Jessica's eyes softened. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. You've really changed. You've taken control of your life again." I shrugged, trying to brush off the compliment, but deep down, I knew she was right. I had changed. I wasn't the same woman I had been a year ago, the one who was afraid to speak up, afraid to set boundaries. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. "It feels good," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "For the first time, I feel like I'm living for myself, not for anyone else." Jessica smiled, reaching across the table to take my hand. "That's the woman I know, and I'm so happy for you." The days continued to get better, slowly but surely. Ethan and I kept rebuilding our relationship. We still had our moments, but we were learning to communicate, to understand each other's needs. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Vanessa, of course, remained distant, but that was fine with me. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need anyone's approval but my own. I had come so far, from the woman who had been humiliated at the wedding to the woman who had stood up for herself. I had fought for my son, for my dignity, and for the future I deserved. And in the process, I had rediscovered myself. It wasn't the easy way. It wasn't the path I had planned, but it was mine. And that was enough. The days following my confrontation with Vanessa had been quiet. After the storm had passed, I was left with a strange sense of peace, but I couldn't ignore the unease that lingered. Things weren't perfect, they were far from it, in fact, but as I moved forward, I could feel something shifting. The small steps I had taken to reclaim my life had begun to have an impact, not just on me, but on my relationship with Ethan too. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to back down. I had come this far, stood my ground, and now it was time to rebuild, to heal the wounds that had been inflicted, to find a way forward for myself and my family. The phone rang one evening, breaking me from my thoughts. I had spent the day organizing some paperwork for work, but in the back of my mind, there was always that feeling of uncertainty. The moment I saw Ethan's name on the caller ID, my heart skipped a beat. It had been a few days since we last spoke. I had been giving him space, knowing that we both needed time to process everything. I didn't want to pressure him, but I also needed to know if the walls that had been built between us could be torn down. "Hey, Mom," his voice came through the phone, calm but slightly hesitant. "Are you busy?" I smiled softly. Even in his tone, I could hear the uncertainty, the conflict still swirling inside him. "Not at all. What's up?" "I was wondering if we could talk. I've been thinking about everything a lot, about what happened with Vanessa, with you, and I think we need to talk about where we go from here." I took a deep breath. I had been waiting for this moment, the moment when Ethan would be ready to face what had happened, to face me. But at the same time, a part of me was scared. What if things weren't the same? What if our bond couldn't be repaired? But I couldn't let fear control me. I had to be strong. This was my chance to rebuild, to heal, and to show Ethan that we could move forward together. "I'd like that," I said, my voice steady. "Come over whenever you're ready." When Ethan arrived, I could see the exhaustion on his face. He had always worn his emotions on his sleeve, and today was no different. He didn't say anything right away, but instead took a seat on the couch, his body tense, like he was preparing for something difficult. I sat down beside him, my heart heavy with the words I knew needed to be said. We couldn't keep avoiding the elephant in the room. "I know things have been tense between us," I began, my voice soft. "And I know I hurt you with my actions, with my words, but I also know that you've been hurt too. I want to understand what happened, Ethan. I need to understand where we went wrong, because I don't want to keep going like this." Ethan shifted in his seat, his hands clasped tightly together. "It's not just you, Mom, it's everything. Vanessa and I were still trying to figure things out, and I didn't know how to navigate it all. I didn't want to hurt you, but I ended up doing it anyway." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. It hurt, yes, but I understood. Ethan had been torn between two worlds, between his loyalty to me and his new life with Vanessa. But I needed him to understand that his silence had been just as painful as the words Vanessa had said. "I understand that you were caught in the middle," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. but you didn't stand up for me when I needed you most, and that hurt more than anything." "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have been there for you. I let you down." The words were raw, filled with remorse. I could see the weight of his guilt pressing on him. But more than that, I could see something else, a willingness to make things right. That was all I needed to hear. "I don't want to keep living in the past, Ethan," I said, my voice firm. "I want to move forward. I want to rebuild what we have. But it has to come from both of us. I need you to understand that I'm your mother, and I deserve to be treated with respect. I need you to stand by me." He looked at me then, and for the first time in a long time, his eyes weren't filled with confusion or frustration. There was clarity there, a deep understanding of what I had been saying all along. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said again, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been selfish. I didn't see it before, but now I do. I don't want to lose you." And in that moment, everything felt like it was shifting. The tension that had been hanging between us began to loosen, the walls we had built around ourselves slowly starting to come down. The conversation wasn't easy, but it was necessary. We talked about Vanessa, about what she had said at the wedding, and about how we could move forward together. I wasn't asking for things to go back to how they were. I didn't expect that. But I needed Ethan to understand that I was still his mother, that I still mattered. As the evening wore on, we shared more than just words. We shared our pain, our regrets, and our hopes for the future. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Before Ethan left, he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mom. I'm really sorry for everything. I'll do better, I promise." And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The future wasn't clear, but I knew we could make it through this. Together. The next few days passed, and things between Ethan and me began to improve. Slowly, we started rebuilding our relationship, step by step. It wasn't always easy, and there were still moments of tension, but the walls that had once separated us were coming down. At work, I threw myself into my new role with even more determination. The project I had taken on was demanding, but it was also fulfilling. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward in all aspects of my life, personal and professional. I had something to focus on, something that gave me purpose outside of the drama of my personal life. But it wasn't just about the work. It was about the fact that I was learning to live for myself, to stop living for the approval of others. I had spent so many years trying to make sure everyone else was happy, but now, for the first time in a long time, I was focusing on what made me happy. One evening, as I sat at my desk, finishing up some work for the day, I received a text from Jessica. "Hey, how are you doing? I've been thinking about you. We need to catch up soon. It's been too long." I smiled at the message, grateful for her constant support. I had always been able to count on Jessica, no matter what. She had been with me through everything, the highs and the lows, the moments when I felt like giving up and the moments when I felt like I was on top of the world. "I'm doing well. I've been busy with work, but things are finally starting to feel normal again. Let's get together soon." Jessica replied almost instantly. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. You've come so far, and I know it hasn't been easy. Let's celebrate. You deserve it." I felt a rush of emotion, realizing how much Jessica had been there for me. She had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. That weekend, Jessica and I met up for coffee. We sat in a cozy cafe, sipping our drinks and talking about everything. It was like old times again, just two friends catching up, no worries, no tension. "So, how's everything going with Ethan?" Jessica asked, her eyes full of concern. "It's better," I said, smiling. "We're talking again, we're trying to rebuild. It's not perfect, but it's progress, and I'm not going to rush it. I've learned that everything takes time." Jessica nodded. "I'm so glad to hear that. You deserve to have peace, Sarah. You've been through so much." "I know," I said quietly, "but I think I'm finally finding my way again. It's not about fixing everything overnight. It's about moving forward one step at a time." Jessica reached across the table and took my hand. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah, and you're doing great. Just remember to take care of yourself, too." I smiled, squeezing her hand in return. "I will. I've learned that I have to put myself first. It's the only way to truly move forward." The days turned into weeks, and slowly, things began to feel more normal. My relationship with Ethan was still a work in progress, but I was learning how to navigate the new dynamics. We were both learning. I had learned to stand up for myself, to set boundaries, and Ethan was learning how to balance his life with Vanessa and me. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Vanessa, on the other hand, continued to be distant. She didn't reach out, and whenever we saw each other, the tension was palpable. But I wasn't concerned with her anymore. I had learned that my worth didn't depend on her approval, and I wasn't going to let her control how I felt about myself. I had found my strength again. I was learning how to live for myself, how to be the woman I was always meant to be. And as the days went by, I knew that I was finally on the right path. I had taken back control of my life, and nothing, not even Vanessa, could take that away from me.